Let's begin with the session that we have up for today, wherein we'll be talking about the Android development course that is offered by Edureka. So before I begin with the course, let me just brief you about this complete entire course and how the work goes on. So what we'll be doing is we'll be having live sessions every weekend, and we'll be talking about the various concepts of Android application development. When we talk about Android application development, what we'll be doing is we'll be conducting live online classes. Every particular class that you receive or just you are a part of it, right, will be recorded in your LMS. For example, what you do is you miss out on a particular session and you just want to gain back the concepts that were taught in a particular session. So that particular recording will be available in your LMS accounts. Post the classes, what you'll be having is you'll be having a 24/7 support. That is, anytime you feel like asking a query, what you need to do is you need to raise a ticket and it will be available or responding back to all the queries of yours. In the LMS, you'll also find a module-wise quiz section so that everything that is being taught is also being related to with the help of a quiz. So you all need to answer back to the quiz questions that are available or put up in the LMS accounts for you. Then we'll be also working on a project. So this complete entire course, the major objective of this entire course is to make you all be competent enough to create a project all by yourself, right? So that is the outcome of this course, that you'll be able, or you'll be competent enough that you'll be able to create a project all by yourself. Then we'll also be providing you the certificates that goes on with this course. So for example, you have successfully completed this course, you have created your project, we have accepted your project, then you'll be getting a certification out of this course as well. So let's first of all talk about what is it. What is Android? All right. So the person that you see here on the left of your screen is Andy Rubin. So he is the co-founder of Android Inc. That is, nowadays more than 1 million Android devices are using. Right. So it is an operating system that was offered to us by Andy Rubin, and every day more than 1 million new Android devices are activated. So it's a huge user base that we are talking about in terms of user acceptance. So the larger the user base, the more is the demand for the operators, or say for the providers of services to these devices. So that is where we step in. We as Android developers are the ones who are actually catering to the needs of all the daily users by creating various business enterprise applications to serve the various business needs of the industry. Let's also talk about what exactly is the ecosystem that this particular thing works on, or the Android framework works on. So there is a wide variety of devices manufacturers that make use of Android framework in order to customize their own needs. For example, if I talk about Samsung, all right, Samsung might be creating or leveraging some of the APIs that are available onto the Android framework and may build up a few of the functionalities that they feel like building up on the APIs that are available as a core component to the Android framework. Google, everyone knows Android is powered by Google, so they are the main producers of the Android softwares. Then we have the consumers, or what we say the target user base. So the consumers are the ones that derive the need for using the operating system. The more benefits that they get out of the operating system, the more consumers will be attracted towards the operating system. Then we have the application development houses. Let's come to the point now. I say, if I'm building up, or say I'm buying an Android device, what I necessarily mean is, or what my thinking would be is, that I need to have a lot of applications that serve my need. If you talk about the Android Play Store, it has got n number of applications that you can think of. So that is the reason why Android has supremacy over the other operating systems, just because it has got a very sizable, I would say, the App Store. The App Store is something that you people can look into and find any application that you feel may be serving your purpose. So we as Android application developers are the ones who actually create those applications, and that is where we step in. There's also immense opportunity in terms of freelancing projects in Android application. I'll tell you a few things. Majorly, the Android application projects are not that large in size. All right. So what happens is that freelancing projects are easy to bid on with respect to the Android application development program, and also you can create them in a sizable portion. Say within a span of 3 months or 4 months, you'll be able to create an Android application all by yourself. So that is where the freelancers also step in and get the projects out of the companies and also work as a part-time basis. However, apart from the freelancers, also the Android system is also working on in terms of the employability also. So there's a huge demand for Android developers, professionals on a regular basis also in the industry. Android also provides you, the framework also provides you app monetization. So when we talk about, if, for example, what I want to do is I want to create an application for myself, right? I see an idea, I want to create an application, and I have created the idea of the application. But if I make it paid, that is, if I make my application to be downloaded as a paid version, then what I need to do is I need to have the user base decreases, just because my application is now available as a paid category and most of the users might not be downloading the application. But Android also, the Play Store also gives you monetization. You might have seen, how many of you have seen the applications wherein you see a few ads going on anytime you're connected onto the internet? I'll wait for your responses back onto the chat window. How many of you have seen that? The application's getting some advertisements going on. When you click on an advertisement, it opens up a page, and everyone, right? I need some responsiveness from the batch here. Everyone. It's not only on YouTube and Facebook, Sandeep, it's on any number of applications that you download under the free category, apart from few applications like the WhatsApp and everything, right? It's like, it's a part of monetization that we people do. We integrate an AdMob SDK that will create, or say runtime, what it will do is it will create, keep on adding the monetization advertisements. It's more so a pay-per-click concept. Wherever the user clicks on the advertisement, you just get some money out of it into your account. For example, you are having a developer account, you have created an application. You have also placed monetization inside your application using the AdMob SDK. Once the application gets uploaded onto the Play Store, there's a download count that goes on for the application. Depending on how much downloads you have for your application, what you do get is you get money out of it. The money percentage depends on the category of downloads that your application goes into, right? So if your application is the top 50 grossing applications, the money that you get out of the app monetization is a lot larger. And if your application is somewhere in the back stack, what will happen is your app monetization would be giving you some results out of it, right? So that is how the monetization works. So if you have only created an application and you just want to monetize it, that way you can also do it. Everything that you get will be credited to your account, and then you can actually get the PayPal account done. Questions for everyone here. What are the building blocks of an Android application? Is anyone aware about these? Let's test your knowledge now. Since you have all joined into the webinar, let's see how much prepared you are for the webinar. Anyone who can answer me back, what are the various building blocks of an Android application? Though I'll be covering this up, but if any one of you knows about it, I will be more glad to know about it. If you do not know, just respond back with an N so that I can just move ahead. All right, Samir. All right, great. Then we'll be talking about, so what I'll be doing is I'll be explaining you every single concept that we talk about in terms of the building blocks of an Android application. I'll talk about an activity lifecycle, all right? When I talk about an activity lifecycle, what I necessarily mean is every single screen that you see on an Android device as a part of an application is called an activity, everyone, right? Then we'll be also talking about how the Android framework handles the hardware events, how the applications can run in the background and do the network download. Then we'll be talking about multiple apps that access the shared resources. When I talk about the shared resources, let me give you some insight into it. When I say shared resources, you people might have seen images, you people might have seen the contacts, you people might have seen the messages, the call logs, right? They are actually a part of the device memory. These are not something that are related to our application or say n number of applications that the user has installed. So how the Android framework deals with it is, it gives you access to these system resources per application basis. So every application that you install or download that requests for images will be downloading or requesting for images from the central repository of data that is called content providers. We'll be talking in more detail when we'll be covering it up. Let's first of all talk about the introduction, right? What exactly is an Android framework and how we make use of or leverage the framework in order to build our native applications. So let's talk about Android. The Android is an open software platform which consists of or comprises of a complete stack, which includes the operating system, the middleware, and all the applications that the user installs onto the device. What is the mode? What is the programming language that we use in order to write these programs? That is Java, right? Let me also tell you or brief you about this course. What you'll be doing is you'll be able to create native Android applications post you complete this course. As I told you, we'll be covering up a project post the completion of the entire course duration. The project will be a native application that you can create by yourself, post it onto the Google Play Store and get the monetization working for it. All right. How has Android evolved? Right. So the very first version of the Android operating system that was launched in the market was 1.5, right? And I started working on Android application development since version 1.6, right? So I'm having an experience of around 6 years into Android application development and have been working on Android since the donut version. And now what we have done is we have reached the Android KitKat version 4.4, right? So it has been a long journey and a very quick one. So if you all know now, majority of the devices that you see in the market are running on Android framework, right? So there are two market leaders, one is Android, one is iOS, right? And Android is far more in terms of the user base as compared to the iOS user base. So the more the user base, the greater the opportunities for the application developers. So you can see that now what exactly is the percentage of what version is available in the market. So if you talk about Froyo, it had only 0.7 or 0.7% of the distribution. Then you had Gingerbread, which was 13.6. Similarly, the ICS, that was 10.6. Now if you take a look at KitKat, what you can see is that it is governing around 20% of the distribution that goes on with the operating system. So that is a high percentage, right? So if I talk about 20% running on KitKat, that means it's like 1/5 of my user base is making use of the KitKat as an operating system. Let's talk about the components. The components behind any Android app that you might create. One component I have already talked about, which is an activity. So everything that you see on an Android application screen is a part of an activity. If you people can relate to other programming languages, let me talk about an activity as a form in the .NET perspective, right? So everyone, just remember that an activity is very much like a form that has got a few set of user interfaces that the user interacts with. If you talk about a Facebook application, the Facebook application also has got an activity where the user sees the news feeds, the user sees the friend requests and everything, right? So I hope the activity component of the Android application is clear to everyone. Any doubts, any questions, you can respond back onto the chat window. Let's then talk about the intents. If I talk about the intents, what I necessarily mean is that the intents are the action initiators. I told you something that if I want to have a query or access to all the images that are housed onto the device, the intents are the one that help me in doing that. It's more so the action initiators that I have. For example, I want to say, okay, I have screen 1, I have screen 2. Alright, Samir has asked me a very good question here. What software we need to develop the app? If you take a look, Samir, I've already got it opened up for you, right? So this is an Eclipse environment with the ADT bundle plugin. Can you see that? Java ADT. It's more so an Eclipse software with the ADT plugin installed into it that we'll be making use of in order to develop our applications. You can see that this is my workspace, right? So whatever I'll be creating will be created as a part of my workspace. Samir. Any doubts, any questions? You can respond back. Then we talked about intents, all right? So I told you the intents are the action initiators. For example, I say I have to launch screen 1, right? Which has to be launched from screen 2. And I can do a vice versa. I can say it's launch screen 2 from screen 1. So what I need to do is I need to have an action initiation done. That action initiation is the part of the intents. Then we have another component which we call as service. Has anyone taken a look at a call recording application? Any call recording application? Has anyone taken a look at it? If anyone knows about it? No, Samir. All right, Samir has asked me a question here. Can we use a Dreamweaver or VB for app development? Actually, they are majorly used for C++ programming, Samir. And what we are doing is we are doing a Java development. So we'll be making use of NetBeans, or we'll be making use of the Android Studio, or we'll be making use of the Android ADT bundle. So that is how we'll be doing the app development. It's just that the Dreamweaver or the VB does not support this kind of development. Samir, sorry. Let's talk about a service. All right. I say what I want to do is I want to have the user call recorded. Anytime the user receives a call, I want my application to have the call recording done in the background. Right. App Accelerator is for cross-application development, Tarun. All right. When we talk about, say, a call being received, what I want to do is I want to record the call in the background. Whenever we talk about anything that runs in the background and does not have a user interface, then I'll be having a service component working for it. That will do the recording for me in the background. So any background work that I need to do, I'll be making use of a service for it. Moving on, we have another component which we call as a content provider. I told you about the content provider a little in brief. That is images, the SMSs, the call logs, the call history. Everything is a part of the system's resources. That is a Android device's resources. So what the Android device does is it does not allow me access to the database of these applications. For example, the call logs, the contacts, the messages. It does not allow me access to their database. What it does is it keeps a layer in between. The layer is called the content provider. When I talk about a layer as the content provider, what I necessarily mean here is that the layer of the content provider is just assuming, right, that any application can make use of the content provider. So it does not bind the database to any application. However, the layer binding has the application with it. It's more so, I'll just give it to you. It's more so a layer in between activity, or my application understands or just works with the layer works with the database responds back to that layer, and my layer just responds back to my application. So it is that kind of a work that is done with the help of the content providers. Moving on, we have a broadcast receiver. All right, question for everyone. How do I get to know that I have got an alarm that needs to be rung? How do I get to know whenever I'm traveling, my time zone has changed? Anyone who can think about it? They are actually a system events. Whenever I plug in the charger, right, I get to know my battery has got started charging. So they are actually a receiver pattern. That is, as soon as an event happens as soon as an event happens, what happens is my application gets notified that this particular event has taken place. So these are like the broadcast receivers. That's correct. It's more so an event that has been kept by the system, right? And whenever the event happens, my system gets notified that this particular event has happened. So that is how we take care of the broadcast receivers. Let's move on. See an activity. I told you every screen that you see on an Android device is an activity, and you can see that and relate to it with the help of a Facebook application example. Let's talk about the life cycle of an activity. If you talk about, there's a screen, right? There's a screen, but that screen has got a various callbacks. I'll tell you an example. I'm actually taking a look at a screen. However, I'm looking at, when I'm looking at the screen, what I do is I do get a phone call, right? I do get a phone call. I disconnect the phone, and what happens is I'm still at the same screen, right? Everyone, just respond back to the query that I asked you. I have an application up and running. I get a phone call. I finish up the phone call. I'm again taken back to the activity that I was looking at. Is that correct? I'll wait for your responses back onto the chat window. What happens is that Android is a device, right? And we have limited memory, limited CPU. It's not as good as a laptop that is running on an i5. It's not good. It's not as good as it, right? So what we need to do is we need to make use of the resources judiciously. When I say making use of the resources judiciously, what I necessarily mean is that I need to handle the various callbacks in order to let the resources be allocated and let the resources be deallocated. So let me take a few use case scenarios wherein my activity might enter in what state. Whenever I create an activity, we'll be talking about when we'll be covering this course more in detail. I go on to on create, on start, on restore, on resume. My activity starts running. I get a call, right? My activity gets into the pause mode. As long as the call is going on, what should happen to the system resources? Should they still be occupied or should they be released? Question for everyone. If I'm making use of a system resource, all right, I'm making use of some services, I'm making use of some activity components, buttons, images. Should they be released? Should they be still occupied? Vajra says still occupied. Sandeep says released. I would say Vajra, they should still be occupied. However, they should not be performing any functioning. Is that correct? I say they still should be occupied but not performing any work. Is this correct? Right? So what I do is whenever I get a call, my activity goes into the pause state. As the call is in progress, the activity is stopped. That is, I'm not performing any work under it. I finish up the call, I again call on resume, and I go on, the activity again starts running. Anyone having any doubts, any questions, understanding the use case of the activity getting stopped? I'll wait for your responses. I'll give you another use case. I say I have the application up and running, and what I have done is I have pressed the home button of the device. When the home button gets pressed, what happens? Does my application do any work? When I have placed my application in the background, does my application do any work? First of all, it will first of all go into the pause state, then it will also go into the stop state. Take a look at the stop state as something wherein I'm not seeing the activity on screen. Just understand it like this. Anytime the activity is not being seen on the screen, it has stopped. Is this example correct? Clear to everyone? Now let's take a look at an example wherein I am launching an activity. I'm launching my application. I do press the hardware back button. I press the hardware back button. When I press the hardware back button, what happens? The activity goes off. I'll wait for you to respond back. Whenever I press the hardware back button, the activity goes off. In this case, what will happen is, first call will be done to the pause state, second call will be done to the stop state, and third call will be done to the destroyed state, because now I, as a user, have manually destroyed this application. Any doubts? Any questions? I'll wait for your responses back onto the chat window. Moving on, the third component, the intents. As I said, you can think of intents as a verb and an object. For example, you want to call from within your application. You want to play a music file from within your application. This is all something that is governed with the help of the intents. Let me also tell you, we are just covering a brief about all these components. When we'll be covering on the actual development, you'll get to know a lot more in detail about these components. All right. Moving on, switching between activities. As I said, one of the primary objectives of intent is also to initiate one activity from another, right? Services. First of all, can everyone take a look at the life cycle of a service? It has got starting, running, destroyed, no pause. Can everyone see that? It does not have a pause state in the life cycle. Anyone who can answer me back why a service does not have a pause state? Though I have already answered it back to you. Anyone who wants to try up? Why a service does not have a pause state? Whenever I talk about a service, right, does a service have a user interface? Does a service have a user interface? Since it does not have a user interface, what it will do if it goes into the pause state? The reason the service does not have a user interface, there is no requirement of a pause state since the user is not interacting with the service. It keeps doing its work in the background, so even if it is stopped, it can only have two states. One is on, one is off, right? Since the user does not interact with it, no pause state here. Everyone, any doubts, any questions here? Let's also talk about what are the types of services, right? There are actually two types of services that we make use of. One is bound, one is unbound. A bound service is something that is activated or initiated with the help of an activity and is in the memory only till the time the activity is up. However, the unbound service is something that is associated with an entire application and will be up till the time the application is alive. And a use case, I have around 20 screens within my application and I can have a service running on only 2 screens from within my application. This is an example of a bound service. I have 20 screens in my application and I want my service to be running irrespective of the activity that I have in my application. That is an example of an unbound service. An example keeps running in the background, requests or looks for the news feeds by the friends or notifications that you get about the friend requests. Content providers, you can see that the layer I was talking about, my app interacts with the content providers ultimately interacts with the database. Perform operations like querying up, deletion, insertion, and the updation. Then the broadcast receivers. As I said, it is a system broadcast. So what happens is First of all, I need to register my intents to observe for a broadcast. As soon as the observer gets the observance done, it gets a notification when the intent occurs. An example, alarm that wakes up or rings the device when the stipulated time is reached is triggered with the help of a broadcast receiver. Right? Anyone having any doubts, any questions, can respond back onto the chat window. Moving on. Now you know about what is an activity, what are intents, what is a service, what are content providers, what are broadcast receivers. Anyone who does not have understanding of above concepts or the concepts that I have just talked about can respond back onto the chat window. Let's talk about an activity. When I talk about an activity, it is more so a screen that the user interacts with. So if I'm creating an application and my application has got 20 screens that interact with the user, so I'll say call them 20 activities. Now the activities need to be triggered one from the another one, right? 1 to 2, 2 to 3 and so on. That action of initiating an activity from one activity to another is the one that is taken care of by the intents. Let me know if activity and intents are clear, then we'll move on to services. All right, talking about services, anything that does not have a user interface and keeps running in the background. It keeps running in the background, and once its process gets over, it will notify the user interface that I have downloaded this data, and now what you want to do is you want to show up on the user interface this data. All right, Tarun has a question here. Activity starts an unbound service to listen for broadcast receiver. That's correct. That's how we update the UI. Tarun has asked me, activity starts an unbound service to listen for our broadcast receiver, and whenever the broadcast receiver is received, all right, what we can do is we can start an activity, or we can also update the UI, Tarun, right? For example, I have downloaded some data. What I can do is I can update the data onto it. Then we have content providers, a central repository of the data which our application may look up to. Then we have the broadcast receivers. As I said, a broadcast receiver is a dormant receiver that only observes for anything that is being received. Everyone knows what are the building blocks, life cycle, how the hardware events are being handled, the background jobs, the multiple apps access shared resource, that is the content providers. Anyone having any doubts, any questions, understanding this, can let me know on the chat window. Moving on, let's talk about the job trend. As I said, there's a huge demand for full-time employment also apart from the freelance opportunities that we people have as Android developers. And you can see that there is always a rise for Android application development professionals. This growth is in percentage, right? It's global. It's global. Sandeep, it's global. And when, whatever the growth could be, right? The country that we are in, we have to work on it, right? And let's talk about some achievements. Which they are there. It is just that we haven't mentioned it, right? There are also a demand for, let me tell you Virgil, right? The demand for iOS and the Android application developers are quite the same, right? It is just that iOS has got a lesser user base as compared to the Android users, right? So that is the only difference between, I said it's the same. In terms of ratio, it is the same. Demand for iOS and Android remains the same. But let me tell you something, iOS is running in a closed environment, which is not the case with Android. So there's huge scope for improvement in Android that is not there on the iOS. Yes, that's correct. That's what I said. When I talked about the user-based version, what I necessarily meant is the number of devices that are available to use for the users. All right, let's talk about what we have achieved with the help of the Edureka program that we have done. Right, this is one of the most popular application that our student Mavish has created. Right, she was a student from Kashmir, and she has just see this Dial Kashmir application. She was a part of our program, and then she created an application, Dial Kashmir, which was actually a part of a newspaper agency, or say a newspaper headline that was created. Right, so you can see that, and everyone whosoever is just watching this tutorial or watching this video, you can also be coming here, and you can also get noticed in the industry that we are talking about. Right, a very good application which gives you all the informations about the attractions, education, fire services, and everything that you feel like asking in Kashmir. Right, then we have few other applications, the PNR status, the Blackjack application, it is a gaming application, the Reebok shopping app. So this is something that our students have been able to create post the completion of this course. Anyone having any questions, any queries, you can respond back on the chat window. All right, Priyanjan, I just assume that you have joined in late. I still believe I'm audible to you. Anyone having any questions, anything that they feel like asking, you can respond back onto the chat window. Yes, Priyanjan? Yes, Vajra, this is all that we had for this session, right? Once you all get enrolled onto the course, we'll be talking about everything in a lot more detailed manner. I think, Tarun, for this question, what I would suggest is you can get back to the Edureka support team, and they'll be able to answer this. Right? All right, any other questions, any queries, any doubts, anything that you feel like asking, you can ask back onto the chat window. Priyanjan, this is a session that will be supposedly provided to you. This recording will be provided to you, right? The recording of the session will be provided to you. All right, guys, so we have a batch that gets started up this Saturday, 8:30 p.m. IST. All right, so anyone who feels like registering themselves for this batch can get in touch with the Edureka support team, and they can get themselves registered for this course, right? You'll get all this information, Tarun, on the website, right? You'll get all this information. It's not something that we specifically bind the duration to 8 weeks or somewhere, right? It depends on the course coverage also, right? How much we are able to cover, because we do not want to rush up things. Whenever we are teaching, we do not want to rush up things. All right then, guys, this is all that I have for all of you in today's session. I hope to see you all in the session on Saturday, 8:30 p.m. IST. Have a very good day, everyone. Take care.